Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 4, Episode 28. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. What's on tap? Another edition of Two Idiots Discuss Sports, a Major League Baseball All-Star Break breakdown, a recap, a review of the season thus far, of course, focusing specifically on the Atlanta Braves and the New York Metropolitans. My buddy Brian coming back on to share his layperson wisdom with us. If you are new to the channel, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Please consider supporting.
Act 1, Two Idiots Discuss Sports, Major League Baseball All-Star Break Edition.
It is Major League Baseball All-Star Break time, and what better way to spend the 2 to 3 days with practically no athletic endeavors going on than to have my buddy Brian back on to talk Major League Baseball, the Atlanta Braves, the New York Metropolitans, all things NL East. Brian, say hello to the people.
Hello, peoples. Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Knackley, it is always a pleasure, my friend. It's been way too long, not only from the pod, but also personally. It's great to hear your voice, buddy.
Yeah, likewise. I know you've been busy. I've been busy getting back into the swing of things with the ESQ, and that's been taking up a lot of my time, but I made it a pledge to have more interactive podcast episodes, and damn it, I'm going to stick to it. And here we are talking about our respective baseball teams. Let's start with the Atlanta Braves and the All-Star break of the 2024 season. And I told you I had a question for you, and it's this.
Yep.
Last year, your Atlanta Braves had one of the best run differentials, not only in the last few years, I think one of the best run differentials in the history of baseball. They scored a lot of runs. Their pitching was impeccable, and they had excellent defense, so they did not allow a lot of runs. And because you pointed that out, I made a note to follow the Braves over the course of the last, let's say, 3 weeks. And what I noticed was, although the Braves differential it's healthy, they are certainly a playoff team. They have scored significantly fewer runs this year than they did last year, and they have scored significantly fewer runs than not only many of the top teams in Major League Baseball, but some of the mediocre teams in Major League Baseball. It appears that pitching, and particularly their defense, has allowed them to amass the record that they have. First and foremost, your thoughts on that. Are you concerned at all about their offense? And is that something that they need to address here in the back half of the 2024 season?
Well, you're going in swinging, aren't you?
I did research, sir.
Yes, you did. Here's my expert opinion viewpoint as I look at the first half of the season, plus or minus. They know hit ball good.
Yeah.
They have been struggling mightily from the plate. In fact, it's the record. If they allow more than 4 runs, they had, prior to beating the Land of the Sun Los Serpientes 2 days ago.
Yep.
They had not won a game where they had allowed 4 runs since late April. It's been horrendous. As you look back over the past few years with the Braves and what they've done, it's, if you get behind early, it didn't matter. They were going to come back 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning. By the time they saw a pitcher 3 times, got into a bullpen, it was literally relentless. And unfortunately, it has not been relentless at all. Now, it has not been helped by the fact that there have been some significant injuries, right? Ronald Acuna goes down with yet another ACL. His other ACL is gone. I jokingly said, we can rebuild him, in reference to the $1 billion man. We can rebuild him. He will be stronger. But Acuna's out. Last time he was out, Braves win the World Series. But he's out. Michael Harris, center fielder, out with a grade 2 hamstring. It's been, I don't even know, 3 weeks now. Grade 2 hamstring seems to be one of those indefinite injuries that you're never really sure when it's going to happen, or when they're going to come back. The Spencer Strider, our ace and Cy Young candidate to start the season, gone. Not full Tommy John, but not, kind of part Tommy John.
Yeah.
That's not good either. We had outfield issues in left field. We thought we had that figured out. It turns out that we didn't. And then you've got Acuna that goes down, and then you've got Michael Harris that go down. Not good. Many people have pointed to the fact that 2 of the coaches left. Ron Washington leaves, and he was a big part of that locker room. Ron Washington leaves to go manage the Anaheim Angels. Takes first base coach with him. Good for Wash. Great for him to go manage again. But I think that obviously had an effect on the team. I feel as if at times they're kind of faltering. It seems like there may be a lack of leadership. However, on the flip side of that, the one thing that has been constant is Marcell Ozuna from behind, from the right side of the plate, who, as we jokingly say in small groups, I am Ozuna from the Braves, which is what he said when he got pulled over for his DUI after he was arrested for domestic violence that got pushed out. But Ozuna from the Braves has been hitting the ball to the point that he's now an all-star this year. So that's come up. And over the we had Sean Murphy, all-star catcher, out for a month and a half. That doesn't help. Adam Duvall, who we signed early, late in spring training to help platoon in left field, he had a short spring training. That doesn't help. So yeah, it's been a challenge. They have not been able to get people in. I've seen multiple games where it is, no outs, second and third, can't get somebody home. Fortunately, over the past week or so, they seem to have been reignited a bit. Took 2 out of 3 from the Phillies, which was great to see.
Yeah.
In Atlanta last week. So, they've got, they're hitting the ball. They're in your backyard right now. 2 really good games the past 2 nights. One of which was an extra inning win. What led to that was some heroics in the 9th inning. The Braves also got the band back together again and brought Eddie Rosario in, who had,
of course,
won the NL. Yeah, I mean, he was the NLCS MVP in the World Series run. Braves didn't sign him last year. At the beginning of the year, he goes to the Washington Nationals, has an abysmal season, batting 187. The Nats are trying to bring up some young guys. He gets DFA'd last week, and honestly, there's a group of us that are just sitting there watching the clock like, when is this going to happen? Lo and behold, 2 days later, he gets re-signed. He's still struggling from the plate, but you know what? Got a 2-out hit with 2 strikes in the 9th inning 2 nights ago. Sean Murphy comes in and hits a 2-run home run to tie the game in the top of the 9th, and the Braves win it in extra innings. So, with a win last night, obviously the Diamondbacks haven't been on fire as they were last year, but still not a bad team. So we'll see. The heroics, if they continue, if they can continue hitting the ball, they're 7.5 games back going into the All-Star break, or I guess leading, a half a week into the All-Star break. That's not insurmountable, as evidenced by what they did to the Mets last year. Sorry, sir.
2 years ago.
But 2 years ago, whichever. So, it's there. They got a 4.5 game lead in the wild card. Is it great to win the division? Sure, it's great to win a banner. But it has been proven over and over again that you do not have to win your division. You just got to get in the tournament.
Well, they're a tournament team, no doubt. Two things that you noted, and I want to talk about them. The first, and just a quick aside about this, how many people have to get arrested and state who they are to the police before there's this collective consciousness that telling the police who you are is a bad idea? Not a good idea. It's a bad idea. Don't tell the police who you are in an effort to get out of whatever criminal activity you've been accused of. Does not work.
Google it. It's a body cam footage. Hi, I'm Ozuna from the Braves. We went to a Braves game in DC. When they were in a month ago, plus or minus. As I walk out, there's a guy with a T-shirt with number 20 on the back, which is Ozuna's number. That on the back, it didn't just have Ozuna; it says Ozuna from the Braves.
I mean, it's so stupid,
So
and yet
funny,
people
man.
keep doing it.
So funny.
And
Right.
I'm not going to. This is not xenophobia. He's not an American, and so perhaps there's this thing in his head where he's like, "Well, in my country, this would work." But you see people of all stripes, all socioeconomic strata in this country in particular, but in other places as well, where the first thing they say is, "I'll tell the police officer who I am, and that'll get me out of the crime." I just don't understand why people think that works, particularly in the 21st century, but I had to comment on it because it's absolutely hilarious. It's one of those, what was Michael Vick's pseudonym when he went to the STD clinic?
Right. I don't remember.
I think it was something Sanchez or something like that. And that was like a thing for like 5 or 6 years. Editor's note, Ron, Mexico. So this is going to, I think this is going to carry. It's going to have some weight for not only Braves fans, but other teams in the NL East. The other thing that I wanted to just quickly talk to you about was Strider.
Yeah.
In 2004, you get diagnosed with an injury that requires Tommy John surgery, and everybody freaks out that you may never pitch again. In 2014, there's a lot more optimism, and you see some guys that are at the top of their career come back and still have not only very good seasons, but some of them come back and have what you would call, a great finale to their career. And in 2024, do we even blink an eye as to the severity of that surgery and what it may mean for the future of an all-star pitcher?
That's a great point. I don't know that it does anymore. And it's almost as if, even kids in high school are hoping to get Tommy John surgery before they go to college.
Right.
Because again, it's the whole, $1 billion man, $1 million man thing. We'll make him stronger. Tommy John surgery has, and Strider's already had Tommy John once. He had it when he was at Clemson. And this was not a full tear. There was something, I was trying to find it. There was something they were putting, I want to say like mesh around it, something. It wasn't a full tear, but it was definitely a cleaning up of the UCL. But you're right. I mean, I think they're coming back stronger. I think the rehab has a lot to do with it now. From a Braves perspective, they have been taking essentially a 16 to 18 month time frame when it's a full Tommy John. It's no longer just, hey, after a year you're back in. They're taking, maybe not 18, maybe 14 to 16 months, but without having it, and it was damage to the UCL, without having the full Tommy John. I mean, hopefully he's supposed to be back in April, but I agree with you. It's no longer hey, you got Tommy John, you're never going to pitch again. With the rehab and with the surgeries and the advances in medical science, it's almost, if it happens, take care of yourself. You'll be back. You'll be fine. Right.
It's the same thing, the NBA, and I think Kevin Durant was the most recent recipient. He tore his Achilles, and that injury has hampered a number of different types of athletes in different sports, but particularly in the NBA, at one point in not so distant past, that was a death knell to one's career, at least one being an all-star. And Kevin Durant has come back from that and has played at a high level. I agree with you. It's not only the surgeries, but the advances in the rehabilitation and the understanding of how athletes, and by translation, because these technologies are now understood and these therapies are now understood, all of us benefit from it, how people can recover from these injuries and lead fulfilling lives and still be athletic. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about Achilles. I mean, you look at Mike Soroka, former pitcher for the Braves, got traded to the White Sox in the offseason, but he ruptured his Achilles twice.
Yeah,
and he's pitching.
Amazing.
You know, and granted, it's going to take him a minute, I think, probably to get back to where he was, if he will get back. But he's still a major league starter. He's not riding a bus somewhere.
Right.
So it's definitely different with how things come, and I think part of that also is there is such a conscious effort by these athletes to actually be athletes, right? You don't have Bartolo Colon on the mound anymore, weighing 350, hitting home runs.
Yeah.
But, they take so much better care of themselves through diet. I mean, Strider's been vegan for I don't even know how long, and he's always says, listen, it helps me with my inflammation. He's got thighs the size of Kansas, and he knows his body. These guys and these athletes are taking so much better care of themselves. I think the recovery is significantly different. And could it also be that nobody's taking roids anymore that tear down your body? Possibly. I mean, that could also have something to it. But I think that just the way that they are taking care of themselves prior to these injuries helps them significantly with the recovery. Acuna is walking around already. He had ACL surgery 2 months ago. He's walking around already.
It's amazing.
Is this going to be an Aaron Rodgers thing or wants to come back in 4 months, right? We don't know, but what we do know is that people are taking better care of themselves. And I absolutely believe that is helping out with the recovery.
I think you made a very salient point there that without some of those drugs that athletes were taking to enhance their performance, I know that there's this confusion about steroids, tearing down bodies. There were a number of different things they were taking to help with their recuperation. But in baseball in particular, they were taking both of these substances. They were basically taking steroids to bulk up, and they were taking human growth hormone to help with their injuries and their recovery. And by the way, I've always thought that HGH or some of its, similar compounds should be allowed for athletes. I don't see that this masculine kind of 1950s mentality of just tough through it and then be a torn down, decrepit human being at age 59. I don't think that that's going to be, that mentality is not long for this earth. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. I think you're right that absent some of the drugs that these guys were taking, particularly in the 80s, but into the 90s and early aughts, you take that away and you supplement it with the right type of vitamin regimen and diet, and these guys are in as good a shape as any athletes ever in the course of human history.
I agree, other than Nolan Ryan.
Well, that's an anomaly.
It's funny. I was just looking back on this, and it's the Super 70s. It might have been the Super 70s Sports Twitter feed mentioned something about Nolan Ryan, or it might have been an MLB. If you were to take away 250 games where he had 10 strikeouts per game, he would still lead the record books with total number of strikeouts.
Yeah,
he would pitch throw 150 pitches 2 days after he threw 200 pitches and still continue forward. Just an absolute freak of nature. But beside the point, I digress.
Well, the one thing that, and I'm not sure if you've seen the Nolan Ryan documentary that's out there. I believe it's on.
I'm not.
Oh, you need to watch it. It's either on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime. It's on one of those streaming services. Second editor's note, the documentary Facing Nolan is on Netflix. The documentary is amazing, and this will be a good segue. Nolan Ryan came up as a New York Metropolitan, and one of the problems that he had in New York was the fact that he didn't have any control. And they clocked him in New York throwing like 96 or 98 miles an hour as a pitcher. Well, they've done the tests on those radars that they were using in the 60s, and they were routinely 8 to 10 miles an hour off. and they were in the negative, not the positive, the negative. And numerous baseball people have noted the reason why Nolan Ryan very likely had no control in New York is he was overthrowing. And how much was he overthrowing? The fucking guy was probably throwing 106 to 108 miles an hour. Think about that. In 1968 and 1969, 106 miles an hour. And they're telling him, Nolan, you need to take it easy. You need to slow it down. And as soon as he would do that, he was probably throwing 100 or 101 miles an hour. And
September 7th, 1974, in a game against the White Sox, Ryan became the first major league pitcher to pitch 100.8 miles per hour.
And
1974.
Those radar guns were grossly off. They weren't a little bit off. He was very likely throwing 104, 105, 106. That technology was terrible back then. Anyway, I had to throw that out in order to introduce the next part of our conversation, which is the New York Metropolitans, a team that I told you at the beginning of the season, pitching's going to be a problem, bullpen's going to be a problem, and we both agreed that if the Mets were a 500 baseball team, that would be a win. They are 13 games under 500 when Jorge Lopez has a terrible outing, gets into an argument with an umpire, gets thrown out of the game, throws his glove into the stands before he gets to the dugout, is DFA'd that night. The Mets have an all-player-only meeting and go on an absolute fucking tear. I actually had a segment the week of Lopez getting DFA'd saying, break up the Mets. This team is so bad that you have to look at every single contract and every single asset, including any of your fan favorites, any affinity that you have for any of the players, no matter who it is. And here they are now, flirting with 500 at the All-Star break. And instead of people like me, because it was a popular refrain, a popular chorus after Lopez got DFA'd, no one bought into the let's have a players-only meeting and it's going to turn around. Now everybody's bitching about the fact that the bullpen needs help and they need to go out and make moves in order to compete for a playoff spot this year. As someone who does not like the New York Metropolitans but has a critical eye for baseball, what has been your impression of this roller coaster ride for the first, and of course it's not broken into a complete 50-50, we're at, I think, 90 games right now. What do you think about the New York Metropolitans at 90 games into the season?
Well, Patrick, here's the reality of the situation from my standpoint. I don't think about the New York Metropolitans. However,
you're a liar.
I will appease you. I a month and a half ago, laughingstock, awful. Diaz goes out again, right? He's out. Is he out for the year?
No, he actually just came back. He had a 10-game suspension, then he got hurt.
Right. Because he decided to roll his hand in glue and a sandbox.
Literally.
Right.
Literally. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah. But yeah, they've come back and they're not flirting with 500. They are at 500 and only a game and a half out of the wild card, right? Can they, 13 and a half games back behind the Braves, if you're more than 10 games back at the All-Star break and you've got to leapfrog people, you got a tough order ahead of you. Unless you've got a playoff system that allows for, 2, maybe 3 wildcard teams? Right? Maybe, 4? No, 3 wildcard teams. So all you got to do is get in the tournament. And, Brandon Nimmo comes out earlier this week, and it's released that he's pushing Steve Cohen to sign people. Let's not sell, let's sign. And they went out and they got a reliever from Tampa Bay. Are they going to do anything? I don't know. But they're trying. And if they can keep their heads on straight, then it could work. When the Braves won the World Series, it was a players only meeting after a really shitty series in Arizona that flipped the season around and continued forward. They end up winning the World Series. I don't think the Metropolitans are going to win the World Series, but that's one man's opinion. Maybe they do. Doubtful. But all you got to do is get in the tournament. And if they become buyers at the All-Star break, or at the trade deadline, which, as evidenced by the move 2 days ago or yesterday, proves, all you got to do is get in. You know, every team in the National League but two are in the race.
Yeah.
All of them. The Marlins and the Rockies are out, right? They're 15 and 15 and a half games out. You look at the American League, you've got all but three teams that, well, a little bit more. But, you know, outside of it, you've got, what is this, 9 teams I'm looking at within 9 games of each other, from the Braves all the way down to the Nats at 5.5 back. Braves are 5.5 up in the wild card. St. Louis has made a surge over the past month. Your Metropolitans have made a surge. You know, will they still be lulled Mets? Maybe. I think so. Until proven otherwise. But it's a good run. And if they've got a good core and some good young players, they could be good going forward. But, you know, at 500 right now, based off of where they were a month ago, shit, man, I'd take that all day long.
And I have. And, you know, I was the one beating the drum to go get value for Pete Alonso. It's a very interesting situation. I look at it like, you know, in other sports where, you know, the team is just good enough that you don't feel like one of your bigger assets is marketable or that you're going to let him go. And at this point, I think Cohen is pot committed. If the Mets can make the playoffs, he has to re-sign Alonso. I just don't see that they're able to separate from him. And I'll, you know, let's go to other sports. You know, it's like Gilbert Arenas and our buddy Jason, who, even though it may not have been the best long-term deal, at the time that the Bullets, or the Wizards, as the kids know them as, re-signed Gilbert Arenas to one of the biggest contracts in NBA history, they were flirting with the playoffs every year, getting into that probably upper echelon, a 3 or a 4 seed, and they thought, you know, we can't get away from this guy. You have that situation with a number of quarterbacks in the NFL. So, you know, are these quarterbacks all good enough to get top 5 or top 10 money? Probably not, but there's nobody else better out there in the marketplace, and sometimes you're getting a hometown favorite. So I think the Mets are committed now based on this surge and based on what Cohen just did. And I think the reliever, what's his name, Aiton, Aiton?
Yeah.
He was the guy who he pitched very well for Houston in their run over the course of the past few seasons. You know, he chased money. He hasn't pitched as well in Tampa Bay, although the last month he actually has gotten more into form. So I think that's a good addition. Look, the Mets bullpen is a fucking disaster. Between injuries and guys that are playing way out of position as far as the types of situations that they're put into, they've had way too many pitches. I did a segment. I think that the statistic has changed slightly, but the Mets at one point were last in the major leagues in innings pitched per starter. In other words, their starters left the game sooner than any other starters for any other major league team, and that put the pressure on the bullpen. And I said it back, way back when, that the Mets may be winning some baseball games, but it's going to get hot outside, dog days of summer. This bullpen is not going to be able to sustain this type of work given the guys that they have, and that's proven to be true. But one thing I do want to comment on, it's a blessing and a curse that you have so many teams that are hovering around 500 and that are right next to that, I can make the last playoff spot, because you're going to have a number of teams that are going to go out and say, we should be buyers instead of sellers. There's one here that I live with. It's Arizona Diamondbacks, who, I think that they're still looking at their core and saying, we've got a shot here. We can still make the playoffs. That means there's going to be fewer assets available because there's going to be so many different teams looking to buy instead of looking to sell. So I am concerned that the Mets are going to be able to fill in all the gaps because their bullpen needs so much work, and frankly, their starting pitching, they could use a left-hander desperately. Senga still hasn't come back, so they've got some issues. But I did want to talk about part of the pressure on their bullpen being one of the dumbest suspensions that I can remember in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. Can you remember somebody who had so blatantly cheated when Diaz, on national television, mind you, I'm watching that baseball game. The umpires and the opposing manager go out and they want to inspect his hands. And I'm like, oh, this is bullshit. I mean, I'm telling you, Brian, I'm watching that game and my first instinct is, this is bullshit. And they turn his hands over. And it's not even a close-in shot on the national broadcast. It's that out shot where you see basically 4 or 5 people in the shot, and he turns his hands over, and you're like, oh my God. There is definitely something on that guy's hands. And then they start zooming in, and you're like, it's caked in shit. Like, he's the guy who goes drunk as hell after having beaten somebody in his family, and when he gets pulled over, he says, I'm Diaz, I play for the Mets, right? It's like, that's an Ozuna type. Like, it's just so stupid. You're like, I can't believe this is real, but it is real. It's
like he dipped his hand in peanut butter and rolled it around cat litter. It's absolutely. I've not seen anything more egregious than Phil Niekro throwing an emery board out of his back pocket.
Oh, you know what? That's the only other thing that I can remember of someone who was just so egregiously cheating and then tried to get away from it, because he was arguing. Like, he's the guy who just commits that blatant foul and then starts trying to argue it with the referee, whether that's in basketball or football. He started trying to argue, and I was like, man, just walk off the field. Like, save us the embarrassment of the Law Mets memes that are going to fucking stem from this, because it's so blatant and egregious. Don't even try to argue it. But, of course, now he gets suspended again, or he's out of the lineup again is what I meant to say, through a suspension, and puts more pressure on a bullpen that needs help. They needed him. They needed a capable arm, and he hasn't pitched that well this season anyway. So, I had to bring that up because it is so Law Metsy, and I can't remember another team where you had somebody just so blatantly get caught cheating and then tried to justify what they did. It's just silly.
It is, and here's the reality. I mean, with what you've got, the Mets' overall pitching staff is in the bottom third of baseball.
Yeah, they're bad.
Right? Not the National League, but the bottom third of baseball.
Yes,
they're bad, and they're still at 500.
They're hitting, man.
Working somewhere. They can hit ball good.
Yes,
right, because they've got to have run sports do it. They're still in a positive run differential, if I'm not mistaken.
They are.
Versus the Braves that have the second highest ERA in the league, and yet are 7.5 games back of the Phillies, who have the number 1 ERA in the league. And from my perspective, the Braves still need a ton of help. Like, there have been some great surprises this year. Chris Sale is an all-star. Cy Young leader. Ronaldo Lopez, they signed, who was a reliever, now a starter, leads the league in ERA. But they know hit ball good. So if the Mets could feasibly get that bullpen flipped around, and I'm not saying that's not easy to do. Right?
No, it's not.
And I'm not just talking starters. Yeah, could you use a left-handed starter? Sure. But there's a bullpen with guys sitting there. You can't just turn over that entire bullpen, right? Something's got to change to get them to throw the ball, to get strikes and get outs. And that's not happening right now.
No.
And if that continues that way, that's going to be a problem. As you said, in these dog days of summer, it's 109 heat index just in Northern Virginia. It ain't getting cooler.
No, it's not.
You got to do something, and you cannot have starters go 3-4 innings. You got to have starters out there that can go 6 or you got to have a stud that can go 4 or 5 as a reliever.
And that's the issue. You got to
have a strong mid reliever.
That's the issue. You just nailed the issue on the head, is that the Mets starters have put their bullpen in this position. They cannot have these outings where a guy is throwing 89 pitches in 4 innings and leaving, 2 men on with 1 out. That has just put too much pressure on the bullpen, and the only way, in my mind, that the bullpen starts pitching better is they have less work. That these guys have less work and less, and I'll use the word, tragic situations, right? Where, they're putting in a yeoman's effort, but they're in a terrible situation. The Mets are scoring as many runs as some of the top teams in baseball, and then you look at the other side of that ledger, they're giving up as many runs as some of the worst teams in baseball. So if you could just limit that bleeding from the bullpen, they may be comfortably in a playoff spot, or at least leading this pack of 500 teams in the playoff race. And that leads me to the kind of the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is, whether it be in the National League or the American League, besides the teams that we see, these front-running teams, and we could say it, the Phillies, the Brewers, the Dodgers, the Yankees, strangely enough, the Indians and the Twins, who are some of these teams that are flirting with 500 or above 500 that you see making a surge? And unfortunately, I know you're probably going to say the same team that I am. I think the Cardinals, they may be one of those teams, right?
They are, and to correct you, sir, it is not the Indians, it's the Guardians. Get it right.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You're welcome. The most recent, dude, Houston Astros.
Yeah.
Astros are 7-3 on their last 10. They've come from the doldrums. They had a rough start. They have come from the doldrums and moved up, and now 7-3 in the last 10, 3 games above 500. They're making moves. They got Altuve, who's always a winner, right? They are 6 out of 7 years winning the National League West. Is that going to continue? I don't know. But again, all you got to do is get into the tournament. They're 3.5 games back right now of that wild card spot, and it's only July 10th.
Yeah.
So if they can continue it, they've got a winning culture, right? Dusty's gone. I don't think that matters that much. Maybe it was an adjustment period at the beginning of the season, but they've gotten their act together and they're playing baseball again. And if they can hit, they've got some really good pieces that could feasibly carry them a long way.
I saw their games against the Mets, the Mets surging, so I wanted to see them play the Astros, and because I knew the Astros would be a decent competition for them, or would be decent competition for them, because they were in the midst of a little streak themselves, and the Mets went up on them in practically every game. I believe the Mets led in every one of the games of the series, and yet the Astros came back once they got to the Mets bullpen, and they were able to win one of those games against a weak Mets bullpen. And then in another game where it was much more of a defensive battle, they have guys who know how to get on base and score runs, and the Mets are hitting in bunches, and that's nice. Yep. But when you get into some of those tight games that more mirror a playoff game, the Astros just know how to win. The other team that I was going to mention, and it's funny that you mentioned the Astros, I don't know why that wasn't top of mind, but it's Texas. Texas had an atrocious start. They had a ton of injuries, and they have this cadre of players that are all ready to come back, namely on their pitching staff. And they could be a team to watch in the second half, because we know that once that team it's pretty much the same team that they had last year, once they start clicking, they're difficult to beat. So I've got my eye on them for the second half. Unfortunately, I've got my eye on the Cardinals. The last team I was going to mention is the Arizona Diamondbacks, who had an atrocious start and are now, I think they're 4 games under 500 or 3 games under 500. You know, they had that.
Two.
So they had that series against the Braves where they had a chance to win some of those games. They were in those contests. They didn't, they didn't pull out a win like I thought that they would, which shows, I think, the Braves are starting to gel. They're starting to remember that they can hit baseball. But I think the Arizona Diamondbacks have a chance here as well. Look, it's so hard to pick these teams that you think are going to be winners in the second half of the season because so many of them are flirting around 500, having had pretty good, if not great, second halves of June, yeah?
Yeah, and I'm going to throw one more out to you. And, kind of under the radar, the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah.
And I think that they're, I'm sitting here looking. I think they're just behind the Diamondbacks. Yeah. So the Pirates are 3 games back of the wild card. The Pirates are 2.5. Pirates are 3 games under 500, but not that far back. And they have an absolute stud and horse on the mound in Paul Skeens.
Yeah, he's great.
He's unbelievable, right? And he was great last year in the College World Series, and he's mowed through the minors this year. He's got that Jacob deGrom, although he weighs twice as much as deGrom, throwing 100 miles an hour into the 7th inning, right? He's an absolute horse. The way that this guy works out is insane. But they've got some other supporting pieces around him in that starting lineup, that starting rotation. And if they can get the bats in order, which it looks like it, and they can get some things moving, they could be a formidable opponent coming in late in the season. Now, people have said the same thing over the past 2-3 years. They start off strong and then they falter in May. But we're at the All-Star break. They're 3 games back of the wild card, and you get studs like that on the mound, you can win some games.
All right, last question to you before we wrap up the podcast. In honor of Doc, are the Orioles going to be able to win the division, the the AL East? And of the Orioles, have they gone through the appropriate amount of pain, as Jason would say, the process of pain and progression? Are they ready to make a run in the playoffs and make a run at the World Series?
It depends. I mean, if you're talking the division, I think it depends. It depends on Aaron Judge and Juan Soto.
Yeah,
that's what it depends on. It's what happens with Stanton, Soto, and Judge. And can the Yankees get out of their own way? Because they have been in a really bad spot. 3-7 over the last 10. They're 3 games back of the Orioles now, but only because they're 3-7 in the last 10. The Orioles haven't been setting the world on fire. Well, they're, I guess, 57-34. They're 6-4 their last 10. But I think the division depends on what happens with the Yankees and where they go. From an overall perspective, if they can stick another piece in there, and you said this earlier, there are only 5 teams that are true sellers before the trade deadline right now.
Right.
Only 5. Everybody needs pitching. Everybody needs pitching. There's only so much of that to go around, and it's going to get expensive. So the question is, what can they do from a pitching perspective? Can they bring somebody in? I think that they've got a starting pitching issue, and I don't know that for certain. I'm going off some memory right now. They've got an unbelievable core, right? They were playing great baseball until they hit a buzzsaw called the Texas Rangers last year. So do they have an opportunity? 100% they do. You got to make the tournament. You got to be playing good baseball in September. If you're doing those 2 things, you've got a shot. How many wild card teams have we seen win the World Series over the past 20 years?
Yeah.
Right? It's not the team that wins 105 and 106 games, right? 110 games. Seattle won 113, didn't get out of the division series, I don't think. You got to get in, and you have to be playing well at the right time, and you have to stay healthy. Can they do it? Absolutely. They've got the young guns. Gunnarsson, you see what I did there?
Yeah, clever.
Yeah, thank you. I'm here for you. They've got the pieces. Rauschman's a stud. They can get things moving. But again, what happens when you get to the second week of September? How you feeling? Are you healthy? And can you make that run? And honestly, I think you got to be a wild card team, because otherwise you got a week off, and that's going to hurt.
So you're saying that they've got the pieces. The pieces fit, huh?
Yeah. Yep. Pieces fit. Yes, they do. I know the pieces fit.
Yeah.
Sure.
I gave you. I wanted to hand that one to you on a platter. Well, Brian,
Thanks,
I
man.
appreciate you coming on as always to talk baseball. I'm excited to bring you back on. Maybe we'll do a pre playoff podcast if you and I can find the time. But we will certainly do a postseason breakdown before the season is through. Anything else to say to the people before we sign off?
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you not for not hanging up just yet and listening to us ramble. Patrick, you've done a phenomenal job, as you mentioned, of bringing guests on recently. It's always the two idiots discuss sports across many different genres. Has been a very good thing recently. I think you've done overall a phenomenal job with some of the most recent podcasts, specifically this past weekend. So congratulations on the content you're putting out and what you're doing. I'll look forward to chatting again sometime soon.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, man. And I look forward to having you back on. Thank you for your input, and thank you for being such a meaningful part of the Two Idiots Discuss Sports.
You betcha. Go Braves.
Act 2, Epilogue.
A little behind the scenes, pulling the curtain back on the magic that is the production of this podcast. Brian and I had our conversation in the middle of the week. As the week progressed, both the New York Metropolitans and Arizona Diamondbacks continued to win. The New York Mets now 3 games over 500. I believe the Diamondbacks are now 1 game over 500. Given the way things are shaking out across the league, the free agent market at the trade deadline is going to look like the shelves of a Costco right before the pandemic shut down the world. It's going to be barren, and people are going to overpay for assets that are probably not nearly worth the money that they're willing to shell out. Given that the Mets have a billionaire owner that has not shied away from paying a pretty penny for a pitching prospect, I shudder to think what contracts may be in store for the Mets for the next 2 years. In an effort to speak my reality into existence, the Mets make salient trades at the trade deadline, getting great value for money. The Mets make salient trades at the trade deadline and get good value for money. The Mets make salient trades at the trade deadline and get good value for money. This is Why Don't Vote, a podcast.